Hi everyone. Little weekend live. This week got super busy. So we're going to do it today. Hi. We started on the subscription page today, so this will be the second one. I had a crazy week. I updated everyone over there, but it was a beautiful week. A lot of profound things hit. Hi. It's so good to see you guys. How's your weekend going? We're going to make this impactful. Remember, we don't want to waste your time. Don't waste your time. The time is the whole point. Why be well? Why feel good if you're not going to use your time? So check in right now, even being on this app. Let's kind of have some honesty infused in here real quick. Like, what were you doing on this app? Were you distracting away from your life? Is there something on your heart that you're trying not to see? Are you looking for inspiration? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Those answers to those questions are so important. And when we talk about your life as your medicine, these truths are really what you're wanting to see. We do all the rest so that you can see them more clearly, right? We follow those rules. Everything we go over in those master classes are to get rid of variables so that you can see the truths, right? Because you do have to have energy as human beings. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you all. And if we have some noises, I've got all my little creatures in my house today. It's so good to see you all. And I talked to my sister earlier this week, and I was laughing so hard because I'm on to a lot of you. If y'all were being honest, how many of you are using the restroom right now? We were talking, and she was like, she's a mom, and she's so busy, and she's like, and no offense, but usually I just have to catch up when I get to go to the restroom. I'm like, hey, so I fixed my hair for y'all to go to the restroom and listen to me talk? I was like, this is a funny world that we're in. So are you using the restroom right now? If we're being honest, are you using the restroom right now, or are you not? This is the potty app, right? I hope it's going well. If it's not, let's talk about nutrition. No, I'm kidding. Well, not really. All right. The restroom is a safe spot, especially for you parents. No restroom? Okay. Some of you are eating. Are you following the rules? I'm going to assume yes. Laying in your bed. Okay. So maybe you aren't in the restroom, but I thought it was really funny. You're like, it's a fun place to be. It's healthy. All right. Okay, so I do have a couple of things that we're going to go into. If you have some questions, you can put them up. I can't promise you that I'll catch them. Trying to follow the rules. Remember, that's a good thing. We'll just start right there. So since you're eating right now, you can always follow the rules, but just have that mentality of, if you're not going to do it quote unquote perfectly, break the rules intelligently. Remember how we talked about that? So you never have that like self-condemnation. You're never failing. You're always in control. You're always the one, that's the captain of your ship, being like, okay, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be intelligent. Right? So you can break the rules intelligently and not have that self-condemnation and all of the emotions that you have because you didn't do it right, or you could have done it better, or you should have done this, and since you didn't follow the rules on that, you should feel, and it stops that whole process. And so it's so important to understand why it's so important to stop that process and really be in control of knowing that you are determining the outcome. And part of that is because every feeling you have creates emotions. And to feel anything, you've got to have the corresponding chemistry. So if your chemistry matches that of self-condemnation, self-deprecation, shame, guilt, judgment, when we talk about hormones, you've got to understand that you are contributing to the hormonal cascade and chemistry that you are trying to fight against. And so it's very important to understand that we're not just saying this stuff because it's fun to be positive and it's fun to, say these things. It's a very practical way to live life. So your life is your medicine, literally. Not just when you're thinking positively, not just when you're eating healthy things. There is no breath of your life that's not medicating you. Every feeling, every thought has a corresponding effect in your physiology. And it's not something to be overwhelmed by, but it's something to get empowered by and to realize how much of your life is dictated by you versus just the food you're eating. Because most of us eat some of us eat 1 time a day. A lot of us eat maybe 2 to 3 times a day max, unless you're snacking throughout the day, and then I would go watch that nutrition class. But for the most part, you can't out-eat your life. You can't out-eat your emotions. You can't out-eat your habits. And so that's where you've got to start removing variables. That's why we do those master classes like we do it, because there is a practical nature to your body. We joke around about tequila all the time. Like, you can't have 3 shots of tequila and think you're going to positively think your way out of it. No, there's a very practical component to your body. If you have any type of healing that needs to go on in your body, you need to make sure you are removing the variables that are the easiest to get rid of. That should be your nutrition, that should be light, that should be sleep, that should be all of those things that we talk about. That's why we do it there. And then the hard work, what you actually need energy for, is life. Life is what is creating all of those things. And so you've got to have the energy to change things. You've got to have the energy to have the awareness, to have even conscious thought, to look in on your actions, your behaviors, your thoughts, your patterns. That's the hard part, right? The nutrition, all of those things we covered in the master classes, they should be the stuff that are just on autopilot, so that you don't have to think about those things. You don't have to exert effort, and you're not, I wonder what I should eat. It should take care of itself. That's the point, because we need your conscious mind to navigate life, right? Because it's your life that has to change. And I want to clarify that a little bit more, because I just see that there's a little bit of confusion, and some people are using my message a little bit differently. If it's not me saying it, it's not my message. There's a lot of people saying certain things, but when I'm speaking, how I say it is how I mean it, and it can get kind of changed in different ways that I don't necessarily agree with. So when you're talking about life is this dance of everything all at the same time. So those of you that are eating, not only is your food medicating you, but how you feel while you're eating your food, who you're sitting with, the light in your room, the air that you're breathing. There are so many variables coming in at any given moment. And the cool thing is, you don't have to know about all of them for them to interface with you. But when you do know about them, it's very important to know the truth about them, so that it's not being used against you. Because if you're afraid of your food, you're now creating chemistry that moves in opposition of your goals. Because the fear component is now medicating you, even if you have fear with a salad, right? Or fear with fruit. It doesn't matter, because the fear is part of the problem now. And so that's how we clarify those things, because yes, it can be complicated, but it really is more simple. And so even if you can't take the master classes, you can always just think simply, just how do you actually feel? And to really start having a good idea of what it even feels like to be in your own body, what it feels like to have your own emotions, and what it feels like, even just the simplest thing. Do you know how it feels to actually be hungry? Do you know the difference between what it feels like to be hungry and what it feels like to be thirsty? Do you know what it feels like to be hungry and stressed? And to even go through these little things and start really, understanding what it feels like in your body, right? And there's such a difference between you knowing how you feel versus you reading how somebody else feels or how you think you should feel, and then trying to put that on your body. And that makes things get kind of messy. So you just want to clean up house is really what healing has a lot to do with. Simplifying, cleaning up, and then staying consistent in the things that are true, because those will get you the outcomes that you desire. And then with the energy that you gain, you can now use for your relationships, you can now use for your patterns, your psychology, all of that actual hard work, how you relate, how you behave, all of those other things. And it's really, you have to move away from right and wrong. And that's one thing, because I see a lot of questions come through of like, how do I know if I'm living right? Or what if I'm living wrong and I don't even know it? You can't, it's not a right and wrong. You just have to start thinking like super practical, cause and effect, right? This is, you get to see a true picture of the effect of how you're living. Everything that you're doing is part of the recipe that is how you're feeling. And how you're feeling is the only effect that you need to pay attention to. Are you at peace? Are you rested? Do you have energy? All of those different things. You don't have to have a name on it. It just, how do you feel, right? And then with that, if you don't like how you feel, then it's not you're doing it right or wrong. You just don't like how you feel. So you want to change the variables or the recipe to change how you feel. So there should never be a point in your life where you're like, I'm doing it wrong. No, you're getting the effect to how you're living. If you don't like the effect, then it's not you did it wrong. It's let's do it differently. How could we do this differently? How could we reformulate your life? Where can we budge, right? And so that's a very personal thing. If you're somebody who's like, I know I'm not doing nutrition right, then go change nutrition to where it's true. And remember, it's less about the food and more about you. And we go through all of that in those classes. That's why those are there, because they would just take up too much time. And then you remove the variables of what the body actually needs. Use your energy to then be in your life, because it requires a lot of energy to make these other changes that everyone's talking about, to be in a relationship and know, how to work on it or when you need to go. If you're exhausted, if you're in a lot of pain, if you're experiencing a lot of symptoms, you cannot put that on yourself to make decisions based off of your intuition, anything else at that time, or even try to put a one-to-one of my skin's doing this because of this relationship. You can't do that. That's not how the body works. You're so much more complicated than that. So if anyone tries to tell you that it's a one-to-one, like you do this one thing in life, you change your job and your skin heals, that's not how it works. There's so many other factors, but we like to use story to have a compelling something, right? And when you're actually working with the body, when you're dealing with the complexity of hormones, neurotransmitters, everything. There's so many compounds even in circulation in your blood that we don't even have names for. We haven't even identified yet. But yet we speak with such certainty about so many things. And so you've really got to zoom out and be like, it's never just one thing. It is never just one thing. And so the best way to do an experiment, the way that I found that works the best and the quickest, is remove variables. That's why I love it so much. And it's probably the only part of like math from high school that's super relevant right now, is to remove a variable. And if you don't know what that means, it's like x plus y plus z, right? And when you change one, you keep it constant. And then if you don't have the result that you want, then you change the other one. And if you still don't have the result that you want, that means you got to change this last one. And then if you get the results you want, then you figured it out, right? A little bit more complex than that, but you get the idea. So what you're wanting to do is remove those variables, because the complexity comes with those personal factors, not with your food. Digestion is digestion is digestion. Human beings need certain things to happen for them to digest food. If you're not doing those things, you don't digest food. It's very simple. If you get cut, you'll bleed. Very simple, very straightforward. The body is very, very straightforward. The complexity comes when you start weaving in the emotions, the mind, psychology, and how that dances with the endocrine system or your hormones and your neurological system, and how that can have effects in the tissues. But again, you don't even need to know that. You just want to simplify everything down to, how am I feeling? Do I like how I'm feeling? Am I doing everything that I can in a true way? Remember, it has nothing to do with right and wrong. Right and wrong is not relevant unless you're the perspective that it's coming from. So what you want is true. Is it true? What does a body need to digest food? And then when you're within that, your right and wrong is, okay, within those questions, can I eat this? Can I not? How am I feeling? But that's very personal. That's not anything we could even put up and generalize for two people, much less hundreds, right? And so you want to live life knowing that, yes, you're massively complex, but the body is very practical, very simple. Just like you could identify what happens to create a sunburn, you can identify everything that comes into play and creates gas, bloating, all of those different things. If it's a food, remove the food, right? That's how you can kind of remove the variables if you don't want to take those classes and just kind of think through it on your own. Just like, okay, every time I have this happens. Then let's not have that for right now. And then you can go figure out where it's actually coming from. But this idea that you're going to do one thing, that you're going to get out of one relationship, that you're going to change your job, that you're going to move, that you're going to buy a new pair of shoes or get rid of a pair of shoes, and then your body's going to change because of that one thing, that's not true, and it's not appropriate. And it puts so much pressure on you intellectually, psychologically, because now you're in the search to find that one thing. It must be the relationship. So if I got out of the relationship, then every part of me is going to change. No, everything changes when you change anything. And so don't get stuck in this, I've got to go find the one thing that's going to change everything. No, it's be honest when you're looking at your life, and follow truth, not a bunch of guidelines, and not a bunch of like, if it can shift and if there's exceptions, like it works for this person but not this person, have questions about it. Just start thinking independently on your own, and that's going to help you navigate all of this. And it's not that information is bad, it's just, one, are you doing anything valuable with it? Two, is it actually creating a tangible change in you? And three, or is it just like a distracting you away from what actually needs to change in your life? And so you've got to be really honest with yourself at looking through all of these things, because even if I sat down with you and just was like, okay, what are the few things that if you could change, you know you would have a different life? And everybody has an answer to that. If I was, if I didn't take things so personally, if I played more, if I ate better, if I moved more, and do you see how it's not, you need to move in a very particular way. It's, I just need to move more. Okay, then try that. Don't make it so complicated. That was the thing, I went and I got certified in everything, because one, I thought what I had was so serious that only like the latest, greatest, most sexiest approaches and therapeutics could heal what I had, because they were severe in the world of medicine. And then I went and got certified in all of that, from lasers to compounds, to lasers with compounds, to IV therapy, to herbalism, I did it all. And then when I started practicing medicine in a very true way, and even having to work with people that were like, I can't buy supplements every single week for the rest of my life. Like, it's just not doable. And so then I started challenging myself, like, okay, how do we free them? Because that's the whole point. And then I accidentally got to a point, and I call it an accident because it didn't feel good for me, after all of those certifications and doing all of those things where nobody needed that stuff. And it was like these really cool, expensive little things on the wall that nobody needed, because life has you. And when you follow the rules that the body abides by, you get the results, and you don't have to tinker with all the manipulation-based stuff, which was what we were doing in the world of, the lasers, the compounds. I used those. I used to be really good at those. I thought they were really cool. And they are cool, but they're not, a human being does not need those things to heal. And, when you start asking questions, you get better answers. You get truer answers the truer the question is, right? And that's where you have to start looking at it. Like, if the whole world had to have these really extravagant compounds and these really extravagant devices, and how is anyone healing anything? Like, just get really simple with it. Ask yourself questions that can free you. Don't ask questions that only lead you into more complication, to where you could be seduced by something that you need, right? Anytime you're forced into a corner where it says you need something to be well, always have this little bit of like sass or personality or pushback of like, but that can't be true. Because if I have to have it to be well, that would mean the whole world would have to have access to this one thing to be well, to heal anything, from a cut to, the colon, to it. That just doesn't make any sense. And so you have to think very practically, very rationally, and not get seduced and dazzled by all the complexity out there, even though the complexity is very compelling. It's very interesting, especially to those of us that are fascinated by the body, but it's not going to be where you find your answers. And so I started learning, even, when I would go to try to find answers from other doctors early on, the ones that immediately went to complexity, they didn't have an answer. But you would get so lost in everything that they were saying that you didn't even know where you were, or much less what the question that you had was. You were just like lost in a bubble of complexity, and then it just is like, well, that's so complex, there's no way that I can understand that. And when you're in that world, you're so far away from the truth. If there's a truth, it's very simple. If there's a truth, there are no exceptions to it, and that's where you want to stay. So anytime that your mind wants to ask questions and it just starts getting complicated, just be like, okay, we got distracted. We went off on a tangent. We went off on a path that's not relevant right now. Doesn't mean it's not insightful, doesn't mean it's not cool, but it's not what I need to actually heal. So when you're in the world of healing, it's got to be very practical, it's got to be very simple, and then the power comes from your application of it, your consistency with it. I cannot stress that enough. And then that's going to be the beauty and the poetry of all of those other things that start, dancing with your biochemistry. That's where, going through something that's difficult, I say it all the time, the time that it takes is part of the medicine too. And what I mean by that is it is going to push those parts of your emotions, those parts of your psychology, those parts of your habits, those parts of your patterns that you're thinking you need to go get therapy or go through trauma work or all of those different things to touch. Life will touch them, but you've got to go into the work, right? I just talked on the subscription page about how me going through a really hard thing gave me medicine that I couldn't have gotten without it. And that's the beauty of life. That's the beauty of healing. You actually have to go into it, and then what you get from it is all of this other healing. So you've got to do what's required to get the outcome that you desire. There's such a huge piece that you stepping up to the plate, being committed, being consistent, being dedicated to something worthwhile. And then the commitment is not, this needs to happen in 2 months or I'm out. The power and the additional medicine comes from, do you have the courage and the capacity to continue even when things get hard? And when that starts happening, then you start pushing on the psyche. Then you start pushing on those emotional patterns that you might have that seem like they're sabotaging, your life or your outcomes or your desires or your goals. It's not. Everything is working for you, but you've got to work to let it work, right? We talked about that on the other side too. There's that, there's a scripture, and even if you're not religious or whatever, it's still a powerful thing to understand, and it's when you've done all to stand, stand. But what it doesn't say is don't stand and hope that something stands for you, right? It says when you have done all to stand, stand. And what we talked about over there was there's this powerful bridge that goes from I've done everything that I can do to be well, everything that I can do, right? I'm following all the rules with nutrition, I'm following with light, I'm doing the energy, I'm doing the sleep, I'm doing everything that I can, that I know. And then there's this beauty, that quantum jump, that quantum leap, that poetry, the spirituality, whatever you want to call it, that bridges the gap from I have stepped up and I've done everything that I can do, and now there's something greater that I have to access to. But you can't get there by not being in it. You can't be, it's not a passive process. It's not, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to hope everything gets well, I'm going to stay super positive in my mind, I'm not going to follow the nutrition rules, I'm not going to follow the rules of life, I'm not going to eat how I know I need to eat, I'm not going to do all of these other things I know I need to do, and I'm just going to hope that I get there. That's exactly opposite. So you've got to put that in your mind of, I've done all to stand. Have you? Like, have a spot check on you right now. Have you done everything that you know? With everything that you know, most people know too much. With everything that you know, have you applied it in such a way that it's weeded out the bullshit from the truth, and you've continued in the truth in such a way that it is showing you how true it is? And are you still implementing that, and now you have a little bit left to go? Now you can say, yes, I've done all to stand. Perfect. Now stand. And that's where it starts pushing your emotions. It starts pushing those places in your psychology that haven't been touched by a passive life. It starts pushing those things in relationships that you haven't looked at or you didn't know were there. It starts touching all of these other places that you think you have to have practitioners for. You don't. I promise you, you don't. I am a practitioner. I went through everything. I've been the person that was the person with 5 autoimmune conditions that were incurable, and then I've been the person helping people heal 10 autoimmune conditions that are incurable. I've been on all sides, I promise you. You don't need us, right? If you can use information, use it. But if the information is using you, or if it's just a a mindless, empty, caloric consumption for your mind, it's not doing anything for you. So how do you get out of where you're at? If you don't like where you're at, you've got to change. How do you change it? Have you done all to stand? Have you done everything that you know? And if you know a lot, then that puts more pressure on you. Then do it. Are you doing it? Then what does it do to know it? Don't let that start working against you, because from what I've seen, I've talked about it before, the people that know the most but are doing the little suffer the most and have the most amount of symptoms. It was unbelievable. They knew the most. They knew the most, but they were doing the least. And the discrepancy between those things, how much do you know and how much of it are you doing, starts factoring into that other component that is so important as a human being, right? And when we talk about integrity, it's not just this little thing. It's huge. And how you feel about yourself and your thoughts about yourself, it's so much more than self-concept. Self-concept comes from how are you living, right? I cannot stress it enough. How are you living? You're the one watching it all. You're the one knowing your intentions. You're the one knowing your motives. You're the one knowing, if you're living with integrity or if you're not, if you're living what you preach or if you're not, if you're stealing what you talk about or if it's genuinely yours. Only you know. Your body is watching all of it. So it has nothing to do with anyone outside of you. It's a you with you game. It's a living thing. And then when you get into it, when you've done your part, right? When you've done your part to show up, that's when you get to start playing with all this other, right? The quantum leaps, the quantum field, all of that stuff that everyone's so amazed by because it's so powerful. But you've got to meet it. You can't want it to come spaceship you out of your very physical life, right? You've got to meet it. I've done all I can. With everything that I know, I'm doing the best I can every single day with what I know. Nothing about what I just said is I'm perfect. You're always perfect, so it either doesn't exist or it always applies. I can't decide which path we need to take with that one. But, so how are you living? Are you doing all that you can do, that you know about? And if you're not, then you don't need to add more knowing, you need to add more doing. And then if you've done all you can, then now you're playing in that poetry. Now you're playing, now you're ready for those quantum leaps. Why? Because you're matching it. You're saying, I'm here. I'm showing up. I am showing up. Meet me, match me, meet me here. And it will, every single time, it will. But most of the time, we're thinking, we're learning, we're doing all this other stuff, and we're not actually living it. It's the living. The whole point of being here, if you can even hear this right now, it's being alive. It's the living of it, right? And the living, right, going through, just like I talked about, my situation with my puppy, going through a situation that's trying is what gives you the medicine, not avoiding it. It's not avoiding difficulty that is medicinal. It's having the capacity to go through life no matter what comes, and to go through life without needing all the things to manipulate your body out of feeling how it feels to go through life. That's the message here. And I want to make sure there's a big clarification, because again, my message is getting kind of scattered, especially by a source. There's no wrong way to do life. There is no wrong way to do life. But if you're wanting that simplicity, that freedom, that's when truth is going to be your compass. But if you're somebody who's like, okay, I don't, remember when we talked about that real estate example, I don't want to do what it takes to change my hormones without exogenous hormones or synthetic hormones. You're not wrong. But there's going to be this huge burst of a physiological change, even with admitting that that's the truth for you. And so, when you're here in this little funny bubble with me, we just have gone to the extreme of I don't want to need anybody. That was my personality, right? I grew up on a farm. We never went to the doctor. That was just in me, right? And so, of course, my medicine ends up going that way. But that doesn't mean that however you want to live your life is wrong. It's just you're in a bubble with me that says you can do it without any of that. So in this bubble, that's what I'm going to talk about. Not because we're against anything. There's no reason to be against it. It's just not what I'm for. And so start living your life that way too. Give your attention not to what you're against, but to what you're for. And are you living as an active, beautiful demonstration of what you're for, right? Because there's integrity within that too. And these are the truths that I'm actually talking about, not allopathic medicine is not the truth. Well, there's truth in it, but the entirety of it isn't true. But that's not a battle to fight, right? If you're up against the wall, again, within the medical industry, there's a different conversation there, right? Because you do, I've experienced a lot with working with a lot of you, with your kids and your elderly loved ones and getting in the medical industry, and that's a different conversation. But when it comes to just you being a sovereign individual, it's that you can't do it wrong. You just want to be honest about how you do it. And even that would be an elixir to your system of like, there's no condemnation in that, right? It would just be like as ridiculous as like judging yourself because you wanted a chocolate cake instead of vanilla. No, you just wanted the chocolate cake, right? And you have your reasons for it, okay? So live in this way. This bubble that we're in is just this absolute like dedication to liberation, because there is this component that I got to after like pushing everything that I could push within actual medicine, within actually being with patients and doing it in myself in a big way, that eventually got me to a place where I couldn't find anyone really thriving if they weren't free. And so that's a little bit of fuel to this message, is as long as you feel free within your life and you have that authenticity as well as freedom both intact, then you should be good to go. And that should be demonstrated through your tissues. When either one of those is compromised is where we start seeing, some static in those frequencies, and you start seeing dis-ease, right? Because your body is just so honest. It just tells you the truth, right, of the life that you're living. And if you can look at it that way, it becomes a curiosity thing, not a condemnation thing. It's, I wonder why. I wonder why this happened. I wonder why this happened. I wonder what I'm not seeing, right? Because so much of life is not visible, right? We even know that about the visible spectrum. Like so much of what we actually can literally see, there's so much more going on. And I find that fascinating. But that's the human body too. So step away from really putting the pressure on your intellect and putting the pressure on yourself to do it right, and that there's a right way and a wrong way. No, just there's a true way, right? And then there's a you way. And as long as you feel completely aligned with how you're doing it, then keep doing it, right? This is not to say that you're wrong if you do it in a different way. It's saying that this is a way that I never knew existed. And if somebody would have told me this, I would have gotten through the mess a lot quicker, right? Because I think a lot of you here too, if you're here and you resonate with this message, were like me. You started out with surgeries and medications and that whole world and imaging and labs and all of that, and really respected it. I really did in the beginning. I thought it was the only thing that existed. And then you either get abandoned, which was my situation, or basically told that you're going to be an experimentation, and then some part of that doesn't sit right with you, of like, so I'm either going to get worse than I am, but there's no chance to get better. And like if you're like me, you're like, I'm going to take a chance on something else because those odds aren't that great, or whatever scenario has pushed you to being like, okay, I'm going to ask different questions. And then you end up kind of in that integrative world is where I went next. And it starts making a little bit more sense, and then something accidentally happens where you lock eyes with the truth, and then you can't stop. And so a lot of you are here because it has sucked you, right? Truth has magnetized your heart, your soul, your spirit in some way, right? And it probably led you to integrative, and then to holistic, and then probably to naturopathic, and to natural, and to kind of more of that earthy, grounded type therapeutic approaches, right? But the way that it's putting out there, it makes it more complicated and further away from you than it is. And so in this bubble again, it's more simple than that. And you have everything that you need, but you've got to think on your own. Use what you have access to. If you've learned something and you're not implementing it, then that's where I would just start clean up, Find a way to liberate yourself, because that's a frequency and even a chemistry that when that is in circulation, again, in addition to authenticity, the bodies just respond beautifully to that combination of things while abiding by the rules that are at play, right? Even if you don't believe in gravity, even if you don't believe in breathing, even if you don't believe in everything required to digest food, it does what it does, right? When you actually understand it and then you work with it, that's when things get a little bit clearer. And the reason I like doing those master classes like we've done them is so that you start gaining confidence too, because it's such an important component, especially in this world of information overload, to have confidence in your capacity to move through life, to implement something and have tangible results come from it when it didn't come out of a bottle or a capsule or a cream. Gives you something that you could never get through a capsule, a bottle, an herbal tea, tincture, even any type of therapeutic intervention. When you live in a certain way and you get the results that are quicker, greater than anything you could have ever done, manipulating your way there, there's something that happens in you that you'll never lose. And that is the true medicine behind this medicine. It is what's going to be like, no, there's going to be something so robust in you, so complete in you, so confident, so bold. Once it's in you, you don't want it out, but it doesn't necessarily make life the easiest, because then you start pushing up against anything that says that you're less than, that you lack, that you need anything made by man, that there's any part of you that is flawed. And you don't live in a world that wants to make that comfortable. And so you just got to expect it. And so, but then it just becomes part of, the strength training or the personality training. Growing up, I had, me and my siblings, we hoed cotton some summers, and asked my parents, why do we have to hoe cotton? Our friends don't hoe cotton. Why are we hoeing cotton? There's tractors and stuff for this. And, one time my dad was like, it's to build character. And so sometimes I laugh and think the universe must really want me to have a lot of character, because when you go down the path of truth in a world that capitalizes off of you not knowing everything that you are, not trusting in everything that you are, not knowing that you are one of the most magnificent pieces of nature. You're not separate from it. You're just as powerful as it. It wants you to not know that. And so then when you're on the path of knowing that, living that, it pushes back. So just think of it as kind of how my dad said that when we were hoeing cotton. It's building a lot of character. I am so funny now because of all of this stuff. So you'll have good jokes. It's a beautiful way to live. It's a liberating way to live. And when you taste it, it's the only flavor that you desire. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit and check out some of these questions. But it's just so important that you know that it's a living thing. And you could literally go through your life and be don't even think scientifically. I mean, you're thinking like a scientist when you do it this way, actually, more literally than the other way of doing it. But be a scientist in your life and be what could I be doing? What am I not doing? What if I start there? If I have resonated with information that I've gathered, how do I implement it in a way that's a lifelong way? Not in I'm just going to do it for 2 weeks. And yeah, I mean, if you tanned for 2 weeks, would you have a tan your whole life? No. So you've got to have that same mentality and clean up your life, clean up the mess. It's okay that it's a mess. On the relationships are such a huge part of health and healing. And so we could do a masterclass on that if enough of you are interested in that, specifically with how it factors into your hormones, your stress, all of that. We could definitely do that. Okay, so for this question that says I eat very clean and very little, still can't lose my stomach. You don't want to lose your stomach. Could it be something else? Also, I exercise. Okay, so I would go take that nutrition class. I've actually had this conversation a couple times this week. It's not willpower. It's not something wrong with your body. It's just the body has to have certain things to digest food, and when you don't digest food, there's such a ripple effect downstream from all of that that creates inflammation, that creates imbalances within your blood sugar regulation, which is part of that whole metabolic pathway to even creating what you're probably referring to as fat and all of those different things. Like, everything is on purpose. So then when you go upstream and it's not just the food that you're changing. That's why it gets so disheartening when you're trying to, I'm assuming when you say lose your stomach, you're trying to lose weight, right? Maybe around the midsection. But you're more in the game of rules and not the food. And so this is a beautiful example. How do you know? Because you eat very clean, you're very rigid with what you're eating, and it still hasn't changed. So what you've done is you remove the variable that is the cleanliness of the food. Fantastic. So continue to do that, and now follow the rules, right? Which we cover in that Nutrition Masterclass. When you put those two things together, it's gonna go super quick. Why? You've already removed the variable that has anything to do with the junk in your food, right? Which would be a beautiful first step anyways. So eat how nature would produce for you, consume how it would produce for you. I always just say, we even cover that in that class, eat within your means, what you have accessible, what you can afford, and what's around you, right? And do the best you can with what you've got. And that's all the body needs, okay? And then with that, follow the rules every single time you put food in your mouth. And then it'll take care of itself. And let that process remove any part of you that thinks it's a willpower thing, something wrong with your beautiful body, that you can work and just results don't come from you, or any self-deprivation or judgment based off of how you look or what that might mean about your body. When you change the rules, the other part that I love so much is when you speak the language that the body speaks, you can remove all of the cruel stories that we tell ourselves about our bodies. And part of loving your body is seeing the truth about your body, and it's really hard to see the truth about your body when you're in like a scenario like this. I eat clean, I exercise, I do everything, and still. Well, keep those variables removed, because that's the simplest, easiest way to go about it. Keep those variables removed, and let's change something that actually changes something now, right? It was never the food, right? The food, you'll see, food impacts you as much as it does. And I always just go about it of like, this is my one body, I want to take care of it. Just like in a relationship, I would want the absolute best, not the worst. The best life had available for me. I'd want the best of all that life has available for me. And if I were to pick it out for you, I'd pick out the best for you, right? Why? Just because, right? So pick out the best, do the best you can with what you have access to, what you have available to you, and what you can afford. And then follow the rules. And the rules are free. You just do it that way. And you have it forever for the rest of your life. It's not a supplement. It doesn't need to be in a bag. It just is in how you think through everything and how you make decisions for the rest of your life. And then that's why you get to go and you can travel, and you can even be in places that don't have the best quality food and still eat and be well. It's not that we have to have the latest and greatest compounds and, stuff that only comes from the cleanest places of the planet. I mean, in an ideal world, we will get back to a point where we take care of the place that takes care of us, right? This planet, how we do all of everything from agriculture to, farming to everything. But with the world that we're in, we've got to do the best we can with what we've got, and then we do better for where we live, and that allows it to even be more for us. But there's still no lack, even with the conditions exactly that as they are. You're so much greater than that. So go let that unwind that in you. All right. I'm gonna have to wrap up a little bit. I hope that makes sense. Oh, I'm so glad. I love goosebumps. Goosebumps are my favorite. It's like little cosmic winks, right, in your skin. They just make me happy. So happy. Okay. Did this make sense? Any follow-up questions before we hop out for today and enjoy the rest of your weekend? really just rethink everything and think more beautifully. We talked about that on the other side too. It's not impractical to think beautifully. It's very practical, it's very rational, and the more you understand, I spent so much time in quantum medicine and quantum physics and all of those things. It's not irrational. It's one of the most practical things you can do, but you've got to do it true. And that's where I see us kind of missing the mark there and then losing belief in something that is very practical. All right. Well, then I kind of want to end, again, we touched on it a little bit, and I ended over there. The same way. But if you can take anything away, if you're still here, number one, don't waste any of your time. Don't waste any of your life. Your time is your life, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this whole thing. Why feel good if we waste time? So value your time. Invest it in a way that gives back, that there's a return on that investment, and be more aware of that than even your finances. Your finances will just turn to dust, right? When you leave, your time is the whole point of this whole thing. And then the last part, if you didn't hear anything, if we could give you one thing for today, remember that, what we talked about. When you've done all to stand. And doing all to stand is not a passive process. It's a very intelligent, active, rational, practical, consistent, dedicated process. You do all that you can. And then that beautiful poetic part of life, stepping up and meeting you, not doing anything. It's meeting you in the process. It meets you in the process. And it finds you there working. It finds you there exerting effort, not struggling, exerting effort consistently with a whole heart. And then it meets you there, and then those quantum leaps happen. Then those moments where life swoops in and provides an answer you didn't even think was possible are there, but you had to be in the game. You couldn't be on the sidelines hoping that you had a miracle. You've got to be in the game to have your miracle. Your miracle requires your participation. That means you have to do everything that you know you can do, everything within your capacity. Be the greatest version of you every single day, not because of something other than just, this is what I want to give back to life because I've been given life. And when you've done all you can do and you still aren't where you want to be, that's when you're touching that bridge, right? That says, now stand, and I've got you, right? You've got to meet me here, but I will get you if you meet me here. So don't put it all on this world that's still very real, but don't put it all on that world. You've got to rise up. You've got to stand up. You've got to take any type of step you can in the direction of it. And I promise you, if you give your all, it will meet you there. Even if your all is, trying with your heart, trying with your mind, even if you can't get out of bed, anything that you can do, meet it there. Give it your all. Give it your all. It will meet you. I promise you it will meet you. If you don't believe me, I have a little story on the other side you can go check out. It'll meet you there. And the time it takes is part of the healing too. And if you can have the grit and the capacity and the dedication and the devotion to life to go through the process, to let it change you, because it's supposed to, right? It's supposed to. And to gather everything that's beautiful and to leave behind what's no longer worth you carrying. That's part of this whole thing. There's answers to questions that we'll never know. But if you look towards what is true here, right? And it is the beautiful. It is the mysterious and the wonderful and the magnificent and the things greater than anything that you could think. That is here, but you've also got to live in accordance with it. You've got to meet it here. You've got to be the greatest version of you to touch the greatest version of it, right? It's all a dance, but you can't be passive and demand that something show up for you. You've got to show up and let it meet you, right? So when you've done all to stand, stand. Write that on your heart, write that on your experience. It's all for you. Your body knows healing, your mind doesn't. It would probably be the best thing in the world if this little thing blipped off and you didn't have anyone to tell you which way to go, and you had to sit with what you have and you had to pay attention to what's happening. I wrote a blog I'll put up the link a long time ago. And it started out with just my hair getting fried and me needing to, pep myself up with like, I have to shave my legs. That means my hair is growing. And that little challenging time in college transitioned into the mindset that got me through 5 incurable autoimmune conditions of, okay, Cassie, if you're shaving your legs and your hair is growing, then I promise you, your body has to be healing too, because why would it create hair if it couldn't take care of the rest of you? And then that has transitioned into so many other things. So life takes you through, smaller lessons to prepare you for the greater ones, but it's still you that has to walk through that path, right? And so if you haven't looked at the post that I put up today, let's just remind you of that. When you realize that the skin must make the journey from the cut to the scab before it can return to healed skin, and that there's no other way, you can use that to see all of your healing. To manipulate the body to skip the scab only prolongs the journey. If you can feel that with anything that you're going through in your life, if it's a trauma, if it's physically, if it's emotionally, if it's psychological, whatever it is, if it's all of it all at the same time, if you can apply that, you have to go through it. What are you going to gain by how you go through it? Who are you going to become because of everything that is pushed and challenged and strengthened in you as you go through it? Let it purify you instead of feeling like it's there to torment you and tear you down. It's there to show you something, but you have to have the eyes to see it, the ears to hear it, and the capacity to feel what is actually true, not how it appears, right? All right, so go check out that post if you haven't. Really go into it. Really go into it. There's a lot there. And then when you've done all to stand. All right, bye guys.